How are we doing, KU Jayhawks fans? This is your host, Nick Rondeau, bringing at you some Jayhawks Daily content. And we're going to talk a little bit about some potential future recruits, kind of where we're landing in that Ken Palm ranking. Preseason, obviously. We haven't seen what KU's had to offer. And I kind of want to answer maybe a comment that I saw that really want to dive into. First up, like I said, we're going to start with that. Yes, a 2029 recruit. We are very out there, but this came across my desk. I had to see it. I had to talk about it because when you see a tape, and especially a highlight tape, like someone like Will Conroy Jr. right here, you can't not talk about it, especially when you got a platform like I do. So that's going to be Will Conroy Jr. He's a 2029 point guard, like I said, plays at Village Christian High School. He's a 6 foot point guard, and 6 feet could easily grow. Who knows? The kid's 14 years old. But he is the son of former NBA player and current USC assistant coach Will Conroy, as he's a junior. And he's considered one of the top prospects at his age already. Yes, they don't go up to a 2029 ranking yet. They stop at 2028. I think that makes sense. Allow the kids to really develop, figure out, what they're going to contribute and what are going to be their biggest weaknesses, strengths that college coaches will end up seeing. But just because they're not ranked doesn't mean they don't have offers yet. Doesn't mean that people aren't scouting them pretty hard. Doesn't mean that they're not going to the big summer circuits, to the their AAU camps and everything like that. And this guy's done all of them. And he's already got, like I said, so we're going to talk a little bit about his performance, but yes, Kansas does have an offer out to him. We recently, extended an offer out to him after he posted a 30-point game with assistant coaches Bland and Townsend. I believe it was those two were there, but if not, I know we at least had scouts there, and they were in attendance. And this 30-point tape was excellent for a player of his age, of his maturity level. It was absolute beauty to see how well the kid was able to shoot the ball, but also how smart he was with the ball. So yes, 30-point performance. I think he had about four or five makes from three. I don't think any of them touched the rim. It was a beautiful kind of like a lollipop arc, beautiful shot, very quick release. But it was his handle kind of what impressed me the most. Yes, he made a couple of early shots that I think made defenders kind of draw out a little bit more, which made it so much easier to split the defender, attack the rim, and he made some very key passes. I would say, yes, his team did end up winning the game, so that definitely helps. But he's going to be, yes, a player that we will see in a lot of these circuits. He had another summer point circuit at Cali Live where he put up 46 points. So yes, he's very legit. He's very real, including one of them where he had one of the craziest ankle breakers with a fadeaway, free throw length kind of jumper followed after that. But it really is his pull up jumper that I think is what he excels at. It's a quick 1-2 off a dribble, and he can put it right in your face, or he could dribble it by you. But I definitely think that he's probably going to be like a Talon Kinney type riser in the rankings. I would not. He'll be in the top 25 when they come out next year for the 2029 class, and I'm sure he'll stay in that top 25 for a while. Considering he's got offers from KU. He's also got an offer from Washington, USC. His dad does work there. That helps. Seattle and San Francisco, but he's just got an elite pull-up shot. And even one off the inbound, boom, went in. I mean, they were all swishes. They were all clean against Colorado Prep at the Border League. And like I said, when he posted afterwards that he got an offer from KU, he thanked Coach Townsend and Coach Bland. And the next post was Jalen Wilson kind of pointing out there. So he's not calling a shot or anything like that, but maybe he says I'm going to be that type of elite scorer, because last week we kind of went into how great of a scorer Jalen Wilson was. I'd love anyone who can put up half that type of performance. But Will Conroy Jr. will keep it keep it out, keep the ears out, keep anything to see if he's hitting one way or another. But KU, do not let this guy slip for any reason. You should have scouts continued communication with this guy throughout his entire high school season, throughout every circuit he goes to. We need someone to let him know that Kansas has always got eyes on him, looking out for him. But Next up, I kind of want to talk about Ken Palm, which I think Ken Palm is it's a great ranking. I'm assuming everyone who's watching this knows about it, but Ken Pomeroy ranking just kind of values offensive, defensive efficiency. And yes, we have not played any games, so this is all projected. This is all preseason, and we're slotted in at 21, which is kind of similar to where ESPN has us in their, regular ranking, which it kind of makes sense. You have to base it off of projected offenses and defenses. And speaking of offenses, we're going to say that oh yes, sorry, our Ken Palm ranking came in at a plus 21.46 net rating, which put us at, yes, ranked 21. Our offensive rating was at 114, which was 42nd nationally. So, yes, obviously our defense is a little bit better considering, we're at that 42, but we go to that 21. So they're saying that our offense is not going to be incredibly efficient, and I can't blame them in a preseason ranking. Our biggest asset and our probably biggest focal point of our offense is going to be a person who is yet to play college basketball in Darren Peterson. And this ranking essentially means nothing to me because I don't think they're going to see how explosive this offense really can be. And once Darren Peterson establishes himself as the best scorer in the country and the best player on our team and the best one in the Big 12 conference, they're going to see how creative his offensive game is. And once he's launching it from three and putting it in at a 40% clip and averaging 20 points and taking people to the rim, they're going to start to really put him as a focal point for defensive purposes, whether that's double teaming, whether, that's smothering him at the 3-point line. That is going to create incredible opportunity for literally every other player on this team, which I absolutely love. And I've mentioned it before, Jaden Dawson, I think, is going to have a crucial offensive output. I mean, I think he needs to. I kind of thought that he would have that. Not, looking back on it, I thought Rylan Griffin was going to have a great offensive output, but you saw the flaws in his game. He was very timid. He lacked offensive kind of aggression. I don't think Jaden Dawson has that. He kind of was the bigger dog at his older school, and it helps when you shoot 37% from three on 7.5 attempts. That's exactly what this KU team needs. It's Darren Peterson to be attacking the rim and find your shooters. And Jaden Dawson's going to be a huge shooter for them down the line. I love Trey White. I love as well. He averaged 12 points a couple years ago, 10.5 on a lot less minutes, about 10 less minutes last year at Illinois. It was just a more competitive team. But he got his field goal percentage up. He was up to 50% shooting and up to 33% shooting from three last year. I mean, that's exactly what we're looking for. And like I said, Trey's kind of going to be playing that stretch four because we're going to be a little bit undersized in at least some lineups. And that's exactly where you need that extra shooter that Trey White really will help us out with. It always helps to have another guard on the floor just to bring it up. I think it's going to be very quick paced. I do love the Darren Peterson drive and kick, but how can you not love a quick pace? And also, Bill Self out of the after ATO, come on, after timeout kind of plays, unbelievable. We love everything that Bill Self has to offer. We love all of his offensive sets. Nobody could possibly be upset with how Bill Self runs our offense. And I think we're going to be very excited to see kind of how successful he can get, Darren Peterson. How many open looks is he going to be getting? And I wouldn't be surprised to really see a pretty great offensive output season from Flory Badunga. I mean, yes, he had very low minutes last season and played behind a minute in point and look gobbler and Hunter Dickinson. That Badunga's going to have some, I'm not saying 15, maybe 10 points a game. I mean, Landon Lucas played, KU years ago, and, far less offensive, prowess or, success, and he was getting almost 10 points a game and 10 rebounds. So I just think Flory is going to be a lot more of a focal point with him and Darren Peterson running that pick and roll. And I'm pretty sure we all remember when Flory went perfect from the field last year and also set a Kansas freshman record at shooting 70% from the field. So I do see a lot of success coming from that pick and roll. It kind of all depends on what lineups we're really looking at. And the last piece I want to really talk about on offense that I think is going to help us fly is going to be Cole Rosario. And he's just kind of flying up everyone's radar. He, reclassified late in June and said, "I want to play with my OT teammates. I want to play with Samus. I want to play with Bryson." And I really expect him to have a pretty quick, pretty good role pretty early on. Like I could see him kind of like Furphy. Unfortunately, Furphy did end up taking the job from El Marco, but it worked out for the better. El Marco was better off the bench, and Furphy was a better shooter. We needed shooting, and I could see Cole Rosario kind of jumping up, and within the first 15 games, getting into that starting lineup at least for a couple of them, just because you need his shooting and you definitely need, an extra kind of distributor, and he's a very good one. He's very intuitive, sees the game at a whole different level. So I definitely love what this offense has to potentially bring. But kind of talking about that KenPom defense, and that's what's bringing us up. That's that top 10 defensive rating. That's something I'm really excited for. They have a defensive efficiency preseason ranking of 92.6, and I honestly I see us as a team that hopefully lets up less than 65 points a game. I'd say 65 to 66 is always a pretty solid number, but that's what I'm kind of expecting, just based on the length, based on the intensity, and based off of what Bill Self usually does. He's got usually a pretty talented defensive team. We've not been the best shooting team over the past couple of years. The reason we're in all these games, that some of the nasty games with Houston, it's because we're stopping them from scoring more often. And I also just love the fact that, yes, Flory Badunga is an amazing defender. We love you, Flory. But Paul Mbaya going to be great coming off the bench. He had 3 blocks a game, for Asvel and the French Pro League. It's clearly a competitive league, but we've also got a little extra length. We mentioned Bryson Tiller on the offensive end. I think he's going to excel as well, but he's just such an impressive kind of resume build. He's 6'10", a 7'3" wingspan, 9'3" standing reach, and 11-inch hands. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard if he just stands up straight. And the least athletic thing he could do is just standing up straight, and he's still going to make it incredibly competitive and hard to score at the rim. So I think a lot of teams are going to have a pretty hard time kind of discovering how to score at the rim, through Flory and Paul Mbaya. And, Bryson's going to be putting up there, but also look at El Marco. El Marco's an excellent defender. He's tenacious. I don't think he's going to lose that big of a step. He averaged about a steal a game. Flory averaged about 1.6 blocks last year. Bryson Tiller at, OT averaged about 1.6 blocks. So these are a lot of ways we're going to be forcing turnovers. And like I said, we're running and gunning. We're looking for quick trailers after that. We're looking for quick points, something we can, really write home about is going to be our transition buckets. And that's something I think we're going to need to well outscore our opponents in, is transition buckets. So I'm really hoping points off turnovers is going to be a big piece of the KU offense this season. But, another huge defensive piece I think that will not get talked about enough, but this man is a dog. Shout out the chat calling Melvin Big Dog. He is. He is a secret weapon. He had 2 steals a game last year, and he's already got it, that trademarked, not officially trademarked, but kind of with the team, that dog mentality. He's just very tenacious. He's got great length, and I just see, Darren Peterson is going to be putting up a lot on the offensive end, as we hope. But he's also a two-way player, so don't get that mixed. He's a two-way player, but yes, Melvin maybe can help him out a couple times. He will definitely be creating, quick turnovers for Darren to be, finishing that at the offensive end. So I'm very excited to see what this defensive unit has. I like how we're, I would think, correctly ranked being in the top 10 already, because they know Bill Self's resume, and they see the pieces that we kind of have. It fits pretty well this year for Bill. So I'm excited to see what that kind of, does. And, what are we going to see? When are we really going to see this come into fruition? Is it going to be Doug Gottlieb's Green Bay? Maybe, but maybe it's going to be, that UNC game. And so we're going to do the last little section here. Is, I always try to read everyone's comments, see what we're kind of expecting of the team, of me, of this podcast. And that's going to be A. Stafford 9410 asked us how I feel about the UNC game. And, I have talked about it in the past, because I said this is going to be one of those non-con games to look out for. And maybe I'm saying that because it's coming up. We're less than a month away from specifically that game. And I'm going to answer it directly. How do I feel about that UNC game? I feel great. I feel great, and I really do, only because, one, it's our first huge test, and Bill Self has honestly done an excellent job over his entire resume, tenure, but specifically in the last couple of years, we've kind of flamed out at the end of years, if that's how we want to kind of call it. We've very much held our own in all of those non-con games. There's a reason why we've got a decent resume at the end of the year when we drop 9 conference games like we did last year. It's because in the non-conference we go almost undefeated. A couple years ago, beating UConn at home with some huge McCullough shots. Even last year beating UNC and Duke. Those are teams that were pretty great, and we kind of showed them how Kansas can handle their games, how we can handle their non-conference. And to speak to this game, it's in Chapel Hill. That's a tough place to play. A very rowdy crowd. Not cheap to get into. I looked, the cheapest ticket's about $600, and why wouldn't it be? Because it's a blue blood matchup. But I'm excited because this is a huge ranking matchup because they're right around, the 20 to 25 range. It's going to be at home. I see us being probably 2, 3, 4 point underdogs, something like that. You can't not respect being a home game and, an away game, non-conference this early. But Caleb Wilson and Darren Peterson is going to be a matchup, and they're not going to match up against each other, but those are 2 top 5 recruits right there. And Caleb Wilson is a board gobbler, and he is excellent on the offensive end. He's got such a unique game. I think he honestly, like in a dream world, Bryson Tiller would kind of look what Caleb Wilson's expected to be, kind of the stretch four who just absolutely can dominate in the paint. And we need to battle that paint. They've also got Henry Visar this year. That's a lot of length, a lot of height. And I said we're kind of undersized. So that game, what do I expect? I expect Paul Mbaya to hopefully get some big minutes, but I'm expecting a huge Flory game. We cannot let him get into foul trouble. We need him to kind of, eat Henry Visar's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, send it back in his face. I mean, we're going to need a very tenacious and competitive game from that front court, and we're going to need a good 20 to 25 from Darren Peterson and, 6 to 10 points from all the other starters and, other contributors. Jaden Dawson's going to have to contribute. Melvin Counts is going to have to contribute. It's going to be a well-rounded game, but we know that the offensive key is going to be not getting stopped by Darren Peterson. And he's going to have a tough defender on him. I'm assuming they're going to put Seth Trimble on him, who's been one of the best defenders over the past couple of years as a guard. Very athletic, very quick. Darren Peterson might be quicker. He might be, well, I know he's better, but I know he's going to be able to shoot well. I know he's going to be able to pick up, and I'm just excited for the game, let alone, but I'm just super, super happy that we've got that early test with UNC. I'm glad it's at Chapel Hill. That way we can kind of see how we can handle any crowd, Chapel Hill is going to be similar to, Ames at Iowa State. It's going to be like at Houston. It's going to be like in Tucson late in the season. How can you not want to see how this team can really show itself and be a battle-tested unit? And, this Chapel Hill team is loaded. A top 5 recruiting class, like I've mentioned before. A lot of returning players. Pretty transfer heavy as well. And, that kind of makes it, a bigger question mark. But people have them pretty similar to us, and people think that we've got more question marks than they do. And at the end of the day, this is the last thing I'll say is it comes down to coaching. Will I take Bill Self or Hubert Davis? Where'd my left hand go? Oh, yeah, it's not there because Bill Self is the cream of the crop. He's at the top, and we love our Kansas Jayhawks. So thank you for commenting that. Keep, commenting, liking, subscribing. I appreciate everyone for listening. I'll keep trying to answer as many questions as I can on some of these segments, and I'm just so excited for KU basketball, guys. I hope you have a good rest of your time, and rock chalk Jayhawks.